Good day everyone, Grumlos here with another DCS video, taking a look at another aircraft available in DCS. This time we go back in time a bit again, and I fly my first generation jet fighter in a video, the F-86 Sabre. One of two Korean War era jets in DCS, the other one being the MiG-15 BIS, which I will make a separate video about later. Now originally I have to say first generation jet fighters were not that high on my priority list, preferring second and third generation fighters myself. So the Sabre was one of the last modules I got for DCS, but I have to say the jet has grown on me. The plane has a lot of interesting older systems to help deploy its weapons, and learning and using them is quite fun. On top of that, the jet is simply fun to fly. And as a matter of fact, I think there's enough interesting stuff that I'll probably make another Sabre video taking a closer look at, for example, the LAPS system, which is a system originally developed for low-level nuclear weapons delivery using DOS bombing, which can also be used with conventional bombs. That is only one of the 3 bombing modes that the plane has, not counting the good old guessing. Now, another reason why both the Sabre and the MiG-15 are more interesting to me now is the release of the F-5E Tiger. The reason being that until then there were not that many opportunities to fly the F-86 and the MiG-15 in multiplayer. Career servers were not that common. There are a few, for example the ACG has one every now and then, but overall they're one of the more rare ones. But the Vietnam era servers that we got now with the F5 versus MiG-21s are quite common, and also often allow the Sabre and the MiG-15, as well as the UH-1, Mi-8 and also the L-39 often. And therefore the appearance of the F5 created more opportunities to fly all of those aircraft. What you have to keep in mind is that the F5 versus MiG-21 servers are usually more Vietnam-era scenarios, not directly Vietnam War, as the MiG-21 BIS and the F5E we have would be a bit too new for that anyway. And both the F-86 and MiG-15 were still in service with air forces in the region, for example in Thailand, from where the USAF flew sorties against North Vietnam, and the North Vietnamese Air Force itself did have MiG-15s in service, though as far as I can gather they were not used in combat. But in any case, both those planes do still fit in a Vietnam-era scenario, and that together with the actual Korea scenarios just means you have a lot more opportunity to fly the planes in multiplayer, which I get more and more into as of late. Now, as a fighter in such a Vietnam-era environment, fighters like the Sabre will of course be the underdog. You can get kills versus MiG-21s, but it is difficult and not that common. But you will also run into MiG-15s every now and then, and also the Sabre works very well as a fighter bomber in that scenario, which is what an old plane like this would most likely be used as in such a conflict. So you can fly it in a career server in its traditional role as an air superiority fighter, or in a Vietnam-era server as more in a fighter bomber role, or also a fighter if you want a challenge. That provides some variety, getting to fly the plane in different scenarios like this with different threat levels and your own place in the food chain not always being the same. I personally enjoy flying the Sabre as a fighter bomber the most actually. Well, let me give you a quick overview of the plane before we look at a mission or two in it. Now, the F-86 Sabre's development started in the mid-40s, as with most first-generation jet fighters during the later stages of World War II. Initially, the Sabre had trouble reaching the necessary speed to really prove to be enough of an advantage over the B-80, which was a little bit further along in development. But that was solved, as with the MiG-15, by introducing a swept wing after World War II. That allowed the F-86 to get much closer to the sound barrier than earlier jet fighters like the B-80 could, though it is of course still a subsonic design. Being a first-generation fighter, the jet still has a low wing loading though, for a jet, almost the same as Fokker 490D, though it of course has a swept wing, which is less effective at lower speeds. Still, that combination of low wing loading and high speed make the Sabre a very fun jet to fly. And at least for jet fighter standards, it is also very maneuverable at lower speeds and close to the ground, making it a good ground attack or close air support plane in Vietnam-era scenarios, where it can no longer act as a frontline air superiority fighter. In the air, its main opposition is of course traditionally the MiG-15 in a career scenario. And in comparison with the MiG-15 BIS, the F-86 is a bit more maneuverable. It has a slightly lower wing loading and it rolls better, and it is also faster. That is especially true in a dive, where the MiG-15 has to be careful not to get too fast, as it will lose aileron effectiveness at high speeds and start an uncontrolled roll to the left or right. On the other hand, the MiG-15 is lighter and has a better thrust-to-weight ratio, which especially a pilot which is well versed in energy fighting can use to get the upper hand. And the MiG-15 has a much stronger cannon armament for air-to-air engagements, 2 23mm cannons and one 37mm cannon. The Sabre carries 6 M3 50-caliber machine guns. That is a boosted version of the A and M2 you get on the Mustang, which have a higher rate of fire than the earlier machine guns. Now, the high muzzle velocity of the 50-caliber machine guns make them easy to aim than the often lower muzzle velocity cannons on other fighters. But that armament is often a little unreliable in a dogfight when it comes to the damage it does, especially in fast jet combat, where you often only get a very short opportunity to fire. The 50-caliber machine guns often don't get the job done in time. However, there is a new damage model for DCS currently in development, which will first be introduced for World War II fighters and then hopefully work its way up to the more modern fighters. And this new, more accurate damage model should increase the effectiveness of the 50 caliber armament on both the P51 as well as the Sabre versus air targets. The Sabre is also equipped with a radar-assisted gun sight, which can be very useful but also needs to be used correctly. Generally, you electronically cage the sight when attacking and uncage it when you are ready to attack. You also have to keep an eye on your radar range setting, as when the radar is set for high power and longer range settings and you fight at lower altitude, ground clutter and terrain can confuse the sight. So as you close in on your target, you want to reduce the radar's range so that you get less ground clutter. Now, versus ground targets, the 650 caliber machine guns actually work quite well. The 50 BMG round was originally developed for use in both anti-aircraft as well as in an anti-tank role, and as a result has a pretty good muzzle velocity as well as good armor-piercing performance, making it a good round versus lightly armored targets, while also spraying a large area versus soft targets. Now, the F-35 Sabre we have in DCS also has the option for a few post-Korean War toys. Specifically, it can carry an early version of the Sidewinder missile. Of course, you would not do so in a Korea scenario, but in a Vietnam-era scenario, that is a nice tool to have. Legend has it that the Sidewinder that the Soviet Union used to make its own copy of the missile, the K-13, came from a Taiwanese F-86, which fired it at the Chinese MiG, which it hit but failed to explode and lodged itself into the plane. Now, the GAR-8 or AIM-9B Sidewinder is pretty poor and hard to use effectively. It is a pure tail chaser and will generally not be able to lock on a maneuvering target if the rear isn't pointing directly at you. It also has a very narrow window where it will work halfway effectively. Too close and the missile can't maneuver, too far away and it doesn't have the range. I have to admit I have as of yet not gotten a hit with the GAR-8 Sidewinder on a multiplayer server, though I know it is possible and I have seen it happen. And fighting MiG-21s, the Sidewinder can be useful just because it is there, as it may discourage a MiG-21 to use its far superior speed to just make a run for it in a straight line. And even if it doesn't hit, firing the GAR-8 after a fleeing MiG-21 might get him to turn to evade the missile, letting you catch up again. Now, for ground attack, the F-86 can carry 2 iron bombs, either 500-pound World War II era M64s, which you would use for Korea scenarios, or the 750-pound M117s, which would be more suitable for later scenarios, though it also was introduced at the end of the Korean War. For rocket armament, the Sabre can carry up to 16 5-inch HVAR rockets, that's high-velocity aircraft rocket, which are World War II vintage and can be seen as the predecessor of the Sunni. With that, the Sabre can work decently as an attacker or close air support plane. Of course, it lacks many modern electronics to aim those unguided munitions, so getting real accurate with them can be a challenge, but that is part of the fun of flying this plane. Well then, that's a basic overview of the F-86F Sabre, and let's take a look at 2 sorties in it. First, a little ground attack mission to introduce some of the plane's capabilities in that role a bit more, and after that I thought I again show you the first online dogfight ahead in the Sabre. Now, this is a little solo Korean War ground attack mission. We were starting in Batumi, which we moved to Korea, and are tasked to destroy an enemy supply depot, which is located at a railway station in a city to the north. The targets are trucks, armored vehicles and fuel tanks, but the depot is defended by a lot of anti-aircraft guns. A squadron of F-51 Mustangs is circling nearby and ready to assist us with the attack on the trucks and the fuel depot, but The older propeller fighters are more vulnerable to AAA than our much faster F-86. So our primary target is the enemy air defense. We go in first, and after the AAA is sufficiently weakened, the Mustangs will come in as well and assist us with the destruction of the enemy depot. Now we carry 2 500-pound bombs and 8 5-inch rockets under the wings, and I want to get rid of the bombs first as they are heavy. But in order to drop the bombs on enemy anti-aircraft cannons, we need to know where they are first. So my plan is to go in low level first and do a quick strafing attack with my 650 caliber machine guns on targets that present itself, while at the same time drilling for AA fire, hopefully locating the enemy guns by their muzzle flashes or traces, and that way I can drop the bombs on them before switching to the rockets after that. Now the railway station in the city with the depot is just coming into view, and I can spot a few trucks to the right in a field behind the trees, but then I also see what appears to be an enemy gun emplacement right in front of me, so I line that one up with my guns and spray the gun with my machine guns as I pass over it. Having hopefully achieved some level of surprise, approaching low level and popping up behind the hill to the south of the target. After the strafe I pull up and look back to where I saw the trucks first and hope I can spot AA fire, giving the position of more guns away. And indeed, some of the trucks do open fire, indicating that they are having AA guns fitted on them, so I figured those are a nice target for my bombs, and I start to set up a dive bombing attack. Now this is where things are getting a little bit more complex than you may be used to from more modern planes. I will use the manual pip control method for my attack, one of the 3 available methods. This one has potentially the most accuracy, but is also difficult to get right and needs somewhat precise flying. I have my bombs selected and the weapon selector and sight switch to bombs. At the little white box to the left, I can now set an angle for an attack I want to fly, with overlays for attacks from 10,000, 15,000 and 20,000 feet. I choose an attack from 15,000 feet and set the expected dive angle to 55 degrees on the white box. Now I can read on the scale on this white box that for this altitude of 15,000 feet I have a release altitude of 4,500 feet. Now with this information I can input that on the dial right in front of the sight with the small correction for altitude of the target, which is not that much. Here, as the target is only slightly above sea level. Now I have the needle pointing at 4,500 feet. The second needle shows my current altitude. Another information you get on the overlay on the white box is the speed you're supposed to enter the dive at 15,000 feet, which is 288 knots. So when I enter a 55-degree dive at 288 knots with the engine at idle and the speed breaks out, and release the bombs right when my altitude needle passes the release point needle, which is set to 4,500 feet, my bombs should hit exactly where my pipper is pointing at this point. Now that is nice, but extremely difficult to get right, especially the right moment to enter the dive to get the correct dive angle you have chosen. If your angle is too steep or too shallow, you have to add or subtract from the release altitude to compensate for that, and you don't have much time in a dive to do so. This is why it is easier with this method to get hits from higher altitude, as you have more time to correct for dive angle and the like, but the targets are also harder to see from higher up. Now the other method you can use is the automatic bomb release, which uses the radar gun sight. That is faster to do and simpler for the pilot, but also not too accurate. But a good choice when you want to get your bombs away fast and you don't have a lot of time to set up a good attack. The third method is the LAP system, which is a low-altitude DOS bombing method developed for low-altitude nuclear weapons delivery, as a result not terribly accurate either. Now we were at the right speed and have reached a point above and in front of the target from which I hope I can get my 55-degree dive angle I have chosen. So we roll in at 50,000 feet and get the target lined up, the 3 AA trucks. I look to the side quickly to check the angle lines drawn on the side of the canopy like on a Stuka to confirm my angle, and it looks pretty okay, so I decide to drop right at the predetermined altitude of 4,500 feet, so when my altitude needle crosses the 4,500 feet needle I pickle both bombs and pull out. And it seems our angle and speed was as it should be and the bombs hit their mark. As a matter of fact, I'm quite proud of this attack. That is the most accurate hit I have gotten with this method so far. But in any case, those AA trucks are taken out and the Mustangs are on the way to join the party. And I start to switch to my rockets to attack some more anti-aircraft cannons with those. I select the rockets and set the weapon control for bombs to rockets and set the mil setting for a lower angle for attacks. And then I turn around and try to locate a few more AA guns and hope I can destroy one or two more of them before the P51s show up. Now I have taken out 4 of them so far, one with the 50 cals in the initial attack run and 3 trucks with AA guns on them with the bombs. But I remembered that there were something else also shooting at me when I pulled out from my initial 50 caliber strafing run earlier, on the other side of the railway tracks, so this is where I look initially. And I at first can spot a few vehicles in that direction, and I start to roll in on them to attack those vehicles. But as I get closer in the attack run, I can see another AAA gun a little bit in front of the 2 vehicles I was about to attack, and I switch targets to that AA guns which has priority. I have however forgotten to change my sight back to normal from bomb mode, so my pipper is completely off and my first salvo goes wide, and I have to adjust to fire a second one. Which however did not get close enough to this AAA gun and failed to destroy it, so it's still active. The P51 Mustangs have also arrived by now and they start to do their bomb run, and I'm worried for a minute there that I run into one of those as they come in, while I pull out from my deck. But luckily we miss each other. Now I switch my sight back to the normal mode and I also cage it, deciding that in case of this close range maneuvering we have going on now, the gyros have trouble keeping up and the sight is bouncing all over the place when I do an attack run. So I decide to keep it caged and use the fixed pipper for now for my next rocket attack, though that means I have to guess the elevation myself. The Mustangs meanwhile have started their bomb attacks and taken out a few of the trucks in the depot. And another AA gun is shooting after them, giving its position away, so I line up this new gun at the railway tracks with my rockets and fire the rest of them off, this time getting a good hit on this gun and taking it out. So that leaves only one anti-aircraft gun alive that I know of at this point, the one I missed with my first rocket attack. Those open AA emplacements though are, not surprisingly, very vulnerable to heavy machine gun fire, so after pulling out of that rocket run I switch to my guns on the weapons console, though that does not actually make a difference with the sight fixed anyway, and turn around to strafe the last gun with my machine guns. Turns out though, it is already burning and destroyed. Either my rocket salvo did more damage than I thought initially, or one of the Mustangs took it out. In either case, that is the AAA taken care of completely in this depot, the rest is cleanup, and I go in for a strafe on some of the trucks I can see north of the railway tracks, and destroy a few of those that are parked here. Well, as I've said, the rest of this is just cleaning up and destroying whatever else we find in this depot. The Mustangs bomb and destroy a fuel depot, and I strafe a few more trucks and armored vehicles till I'm out of ammo, and in the end we get all but one target in the depot and head home. So, mission successful. I hope I could show some of the F-86 ground attack capabilities with this mission. Now, as I've promised, let's take also a quick look at my first online dogfight in the F-86 Sabre. This one takes place on the Basis Vietnam server again, so enemy fighters will be mostly MiG-21s, which are much faster and far superior to my F-86 Sabre. They do however also often get into dogfights at lower altitude with F-5 Tigers, slowing them down, and that is what I'm in this first flyout hope for, that I can get above a fight and dive in behind the MiG-21 and use my superior turn right to shoot it down. After flying towards the enemy base a bit, I do spot a single MiG-21 passing below me and I dive after it, hoping I can get behind it in the dive. I can close in on the MiG-21 at first, hoping for a sidewinder shot, but the MiG spots me. I assume it got a warning from the radar warning receiver from my radar gun sight and starts evasive maneuvers, and I get too close for sidewinders anyway, so I have to switch to guns. I get a few hits with my 50 cals in the first attack, but no burn damage, and I get too close for the radar sight to work and I have to electronically cage it. Now the MiG pilot does have a low ping too, I feel, and is hard to hit, but I think I got a hit or two in before he opens up the distance. As he does so, I switch to my sidewinders, hoping I can get a sidewinder shot if the MiG keeps going straight. I get to turn and fire, but the MiG is pulling up and I'm too close for the sidewinders to maneuver after him, but the missile did get the MiG to turn again, I think. Now in that engagement so far, you could nicely see two differences between the F-86 and the MiG-15 in such an asymmetrical fight. The F-86 has the advantage of slightly higher speed and being much better in the dive, allowing it to sometimes dive in behind the faster MiG-21. The MiG-15 you can also fly in the server, on the other hand, has much stronger cannons, so when you do get a good shot at the plane, it is generally going to feel it. Now the MiG-21 seemed to just try to turn, and that was fine by me, as it allows me to slowly close in. The MiG-21 has a lot more thrust than I have and can go a lot faster, but with its higher wing loading, in the same turn it needs a much higher angle of attack, which creates drag and slows it down. It being a delta wing design increases this even more. Now I could have tried to turn inside the MiG earlier and get lead to fire, but I was not close enough for a good shot. If I start to turn tighter than the MiG, turn into its circle and get lead, my own angle of attack increases and I slow down too. So instead I went into a lag pursuit, not trying to get lead yet, but just follow the same radius, which I can do with a much lower angle of attack than the MiG and allowing me to slowly close in. After going around in circles quite a few times, I now feel that I'm getting slowly close enough for a successful attack, and I start to pull lead and slowly start to get ready to fire. I need quite a good amount of lead in this case though. In a jet fight with its higher speed you need quite a bit of lead, especially since the range to the target is still a bit far. But I eventually get the Pipper more or less on target and I can get ready to fire a few bursts. Now the MiG trying to turn tighter gets into a stall and I can get a few more hits in it as he does so. But the MiG pilot recovers pretty quickly from the stall and now he is given up the turning and is making a run for it. With his much faster speed he is out of range pretty quickly. I do however still have one sidewinder. The MiG apparently knows this as well and is starting to pop flares, as he opens up the distance and then turns into the hills. Now with only one sidewinder left I want to make the shot count and wait for a good opportunity to fire it, when the MiG is a bit further away, giving the missile more time to maneuver, and at the time where the MiG is showing me its tail and the missile seeker can easily track it. And of course I don't want to fire it when flares are out. By now a F5 Tiger has joined the party as well and also fired a sidewinder which got baited by the flares. Now though the MiG-21 has entered the valley and goes straight at a longer distance, and I feel this is a good moment to fire with a decent chance for a hit. So I press down on my weapon release button and blow up. Turns out the F5 behind me also thought this would be a good moment to fire, did so, and the sidewinder dutifully went for the closest heat source, which was me. That is something to look out for in both the Sabre as well as the F5, as unlike more modern planes you don't necessarily get an indication what the missile is locked up to, you just get a tone. And of course a heat seeker can change targets to another heat source after being fired, that's how flares work. So you want to make sure there is nothing anywhere in front of you you don't want to hit when you fire them. In any case, this was my first multiplayer fight in the Sabre. As I said in the beginning, I do prefer to use the Sabre as a close air support plane in this environment. As far as asymmetrical fights go, I think the MiG-15 is the better choice. Both F-86 and MiG-15 bis usually only get short opportunities to fire when fighting better planes like the F-5 or the MiG-21, and the MiG-15's cannons are just better at making the most at those short opportunities. But we will see how that goes when I do a MiG-15 video. So this was a look at the F-86 Sabre. Overall I really enjoy this plane, both in the Korea as well as Vietnam era scenarios. It is tons of fun to fly, but also equipped with some more complex toys to provide a challenge. Well, and this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was enjoyable, thanks for watching and maybe I'll see you next time.